Sometimes in Overwatch, even if you don't have the best mechanics, if you can land one good ult, you can completely sway the fight for your team. We've already taught you how to use offensive ultimates, so today we're going to teach you how to use the more complex but more powerful tank ultimates. My name is Nathan and welcome to Blizzard Guides. So the way this list is going to work, I'm going in no particular order. I'm going to teach you a few basic tips for how to use the tank ultimates, and then I will give you some more advanced mechanics for using the ults. So with that said, let's get right into this list. At number 6, we have D.Va. D.Va's self-destruct is a very interesting one. So while a lot of players like to get huge team wipes with it, and while it certainly can be used for that, the greater value is in the area of denial and its predictable behavior, surprisingly enough. First of all, you want to get the notion that D.Va's ult should be used for team wipes out of your head. While yes, in certain situations there will be opportunities for that, you don't ever want to launch an ult thinking, wow, those enemies are grouped up, maybe if I launch my bomb I can get a team wipe. You should consider how the enemies will react, where they will go, and if that will provide any advantage. The most obvious example is in overtime on defense. Using your bomb to force enemies off the point is its strongest use. Similarly, if you're trying to attack on 2CP, you can launch your ult to force enemies off of high ground, and if they're running a very set up comp, this could very well win the fight for your team. So with that out of the way, you should focus on 3 things when denying the enemy positioning. First, try and deny lanes of the map, not the middle of the map. You want to force the enemy to scatter in strange directions into uncomfortable locations. If you ult in the middle of the map, chances are the enemies are already out of range of the bomb or in cover, so ulting in locations that guarantee that you force a few enemies out is more valuable than trying to force all of the enemies out, since you're more likely to just get those few enemies out, which is by far more valuable. Secondly, make sure that you communicate to your team when you ult, since you're going to need to let your team know when and where you're going to ult so that they become ready to capitalize on the enemies that just gave up their positioning. And lastly, some miscellaneous tips. You can boost your ult onto a wall at an angle so that it gets stalled a bit and then suddenly pops around the corner, surprising the enemy. This works best on slanted edges, so the wall you're aiming at should be angled, not really perpendicular to you. So basically you launch it, it hits the wall, it stalls there for a bit, but it kind of slides towards the open area of the wall, and then it continues to launch forward. So on the enemy's screen, it just looks like the D.Va bomb got stuck on the wall, but in reality it's actually going to pass by that wall in a couple of seconds, surprising them completely and probably guaranteeing you a few more kills than you might expect. And lastly, you can also hold space when you use your ult to get a bit of extra height out of D.Va. So when you ult and you press space, you can use that extra jump to get onto high ground as baby D.Va should you need to escape any enemies on the ground. At number 5, we're taking a look at Winston's Primal Rage. Primal Rage is by far one of the most frustrating ults in the game, which is why this section is going to be the longest. I feel like a lot of players really need to understand this ult to get the most value out of it, but it can be devastating. A lot of players just don't really understand it, and rightfully so. I mean, the ult definitely lacks direction and it can be very confusing, combining multi-dimensional moving mechanics as well as requiring just top-tier game sense. While it might seem like a very useless ult, useless in Overwatch is a subjective term. One of the most difficult aspects of his ultimate is just the knowledge of when and where to use the ult. Firstly, you should just never ult at high HP, unless you absolutely need to use it to reset jump or stall or something like that. Obviously, while it does come down to your game sense and intuition, there are just some objectively correct times to ult as Winston, including point contention, increasing uptime in a team fight, or just knocking enemies off a point or ledge. One quick thing, if you put your bubble down before you ult, it will be useful to soak up some damage since you won't have it for the duration of your ult. So now the question becomes when to ult. If you absolutely need to hold the capture point or contest for overtime, you should definitely 100% use Primal Rage to increase the percentage or stall for your teammates to return to the point and get picks. When you do stall, focus on using either the cart as cover, or if you're on 2CP or something like that, flick upwards so that you can avoid any damage on point and stay in the air for a few seconds, and use the short cooldown of your jump pack to only take damage for the short moments that you actually are on point. Don't do that in overtime though, since you actually might be in the air too long, so kind of short hop, basically don't angle straight upwards but kind of angle at maybe a 30-degree angle or so. Also, if you rush in to get to point, you can leap and then ult and then leap again, since Primal Rage will reset your jump cooldown. Now, when you're trying to contest and disrupt the enemy, there are a few things to keep in mind. Firstly, you want to deny high ground with Primal Rage, since you can quickly get to the high ground, push the enemy off, and then return to the objective. You have that really short jump pack cooldown time, so really utilize it when you can. Secondly, you also want to push enemies away from your allies should an important teammate need it, so something like your Ana or maybe your soldier that's doing a ton of damage damage. And lastly, you can just corner an enemy into the corner and beat them senseless in said corner, suppressing them with no escape. Winston's ult is very weird also mechanically. You want to jump, hit the ground so that they take the splash damage, and then push them away, jump towards them, hit them with the splash damage, and rinse and repeat. Basically, you just want to chain that jump damage with your punch for extra damage, and it allows you to also reposition enemies should you get really good at it. That's a bit more of an advanced technique, but you can get it down if you practice it a lot. And the last tip I can provide you is if you get pushed off the ledge, you can actually use Primal Rage to reset your jump pack cooldown time to get back onto the ground. But I would recommend against doing this if you don't have that good of a reflex time, just because if you do attempt to do this, there is that short second that you do have to wait when you use your ult, and you might just waste your Primal Rage. So be very careful with that, but that is something to consider and keep in mind because it is a possibility. At number 4, the next tank that we're looking at is Orisa. Orisa's ult is relatively straightforward, so this should be a shorter one than some of the other ults. Really, the main tip is that you use it during the mid-fight and not on engagement or cleanup. This ult is essentially a nano boost without the damage reduction, but for your whole team. If your Genji needs extra damage or your Rein is trying to secure some more kills, the supercharge will aid you in just that. The ult is really useful in tandem with Mercy's Valk, since the power boost actually does stack, providing you with 1.8 times damage, allowing you to practically delete the enemy from existence. Furthermore, this also does stack with Nano Boost, so Nano plus Charger or Valk plus Charger are really good options. Nano Charger does do 2 times the damage, but that extra 0.2 times isn't really going to do much. Also, try and use your ult around corners, hiding it from the enemy but not from your team, since it actually does need to maintain line of sight. Also, put a shield in front of the Charger, since the enemy will usually try and burst it down quickly, which actually does lead me to my next point, which is the fact that you can sometimes use it as a distraction. If you need to get some flankers off your healers, you can pull them off, place a supercharger, and usually it will distract them long enough for you or someone else to kill them. However, I really don't recommend doing this too often, since it could just end up in you losing your supercharger, in addition to not providing a good enough distraction. Just like using Winston's ult to return to the ground after you've been pushed off, you need to be very careful and you need to have good game sense to use it in this manner. At number 3, we're looking at ROADHOG's WHOLEHOG. While ROADHOG's ultimate ability does a ton of damage, it is actually just best served as a strong crowd control tool. The knockback and spread of his weapon make it difficult to confirm kills or do focused burst damage unless the enemy is caught in a trap, grab, or corner. Using it to knock back lethal targets from your teammates is where its true potential lies. So if a Genji is dragon blading, you can use WHOLEHOG to force him to deflect or be pushed away, shaving valuable seconds off his very powerful ult. You can also use it to push a REINHARDT that just shattered your team, since that will not allow him to get proper follow-up. Don't be afraid to use it as a solo kill with a support or a tank, since if you're playing Hog correctly, your take a breather will allow you to get your charge very quickly. WHOLEHOG is just best used in the mid-fight. I would stray away using it in the end of the fight or on engagement, since its value isn't really great during cleanup, and using it at the beginning of the fight only stalls the enemy for a few seconds, since you won't really guarantee any kills because of the knockback and spread. You'll just end up pushing the enemy away from the choke, and you'll just kind of not do very much. And an important tip, you can actually cancel your hook animation or your healing animation with WHOLEHOG, which is extremely useful. Firstly, if you chain hook and then immediately ult before the chain animation completes, you can either insta-kill a squishy or launch a tank a huge distance away, negating some protection that the enemy team might have from that said tank. And similarly, you can heal up and cancel WHOLEHOG, catching any enemies expecting the full duration of healing off guard. Those two uses are a little bit more niche, but once you get that down, it's actually extremely powerful in that respect. At number 2, we're taking a look at REINHARDT's Earthshatter. REINHARDT's ultimate is very useful for quickly confirming kills and negating frontline value or crowd controlling lethal ults from the enemy. However, with that said, it can be difficult to pull off sometimes. Because of the height range nerf on Earthshatter, it has caused this strange consistency on payloads, as you might have discovered. From what it seems, you can't shatter from the ground onto the Nimbani or Dorado payloads, but you can shatter people on Route 66 and Hollywood payloads, so keep that in mind. However, if you are on top of the payload, you can shatter people that are on the ground or on the payload as if it weren't there. So with that out of the way, let's get right into how to get a successful Earthshatter off. Firstly, you want to break any shields that the enemy has set up before ulting, ensuring that any possible shields that the enemy might have are on cooldown and out of the way. So make sure that you burst Orisa's shield down quickly or Winston's bubble down, so that way that you're not going to get it blocked. Also, Zarya's bubbles are really annoying because they do actually block any enemies that are behind it, since REINHARDT's Earthshatter acts as a wave that gets blocked by shields or map geometry, archery, so make sure that the Zarya doesn't have her personal or her ally bubble because that actually does get in the way at times. Secondly, make sure that you guarantee at least 1 to 2 enemies in it, but don't worry about getting 5+ enemies or something like that. 1 to 2 confirmed kills is far more valuable than a missed earth shatter. Don't jump when you shatter, and also you can just bait enemies by putting your shield up and then immediately shattering, throwing them off guard. Also, a quick tip for Rein v Rein shatter battles: if the enemy Rein fire strikes, you can actually get your shatter off if you use your ult right as the Rein fire strikes, since you can't cancel the animation of a fire strike. Now, if you do actually land the earth shatter, you might notice that the enemies on the ground are sometimes too far apart to fire strike more than just one. You can actually fix this, however, by crouching while you fire strike. Doing this will lower the spot where fire strike is thrown, and thus allowing you to actually line up fire strikes that will pass through more than one enemy. Which reminds me just to mention, always fire strike when you shatter and then try and line up your swings to hit multiple targets at once. You always want to fire strike since that does more damage than your hammer does, and it does it in a burst. So if you shatter a tracer, that fire strike will insta-kill the tracer. Now, if you won't be able to kill all the targets due to either too much healing or something of that sort, just try and pin the most valuable target. So something like a Mercy or ulting Genji is best, which I should mention, you can actually use Earth Shatter to shut down ulting soldiers, Genjis, Winstons, etc. Basically any transformation ult you can shut down with your Earth Shatter, which charges generally more quickly than those type of ults. Lastly, just remember that the point of Earth Shatter isn't to get huge team wipes, that's Zarya's job. Earth Shatter is just more designed to crowd control and to guarantee a couple picks in the fight while also negating the enemy's frontline or backline. And lastly, at number 1, Zarya's Graviton Surge. This is by far the most powerful tank ult. It doesn't get that much value by itself, but if you combo it with other ults, it is really powerful. There are 3 main components to getting a successful Zarya Grav. Firstly, charging it, secondly, executing it, and thirdly, following up. So firstly, charging. Zarya can't really charge up Grav quickly when you have low charge, so focus on trying to get high charge before you really concern yourself with getting a Grav off. You need to focus on doing damage to tanks and also right-clicking balled up groups of enemies, since the damage will permeate through all of the enemies, providing significantly more charge than focusing one enemy with laser. Divas and Roadhogs are the best enemy tanks to feed off of, since they will quickly give you 40 to 50% grav if they continually get healed. And the next step is execution. Firstly, you just kind of want to make sure that there are no divas present, because they will eat your grav if you're not careful. Next, when you press Q, jumping from high ground or flanking and catching the enemy by surprise are your best bets. Aim directly for the floor or a wall and try to avoid lobbing it at huge distances, since you do actually risk the enemies scattering and missing all of the enemies. Primarily, you just want to try and make sure that you get those key targets in the grab, but don't worry about getting huge 6-man grabs. It's more important, just like Reinhardt's Earth Shatter, to get the more important and guaranteed picks rather than trying to get huge grabs. And lastly, the follow-up. You want to try and get another DPS ult comboed with it or Hog's ult as well. Now, in the event that you can't do that, if you're high charge or you have a Reinhardt or Diva with you, you can use them. Reinhardt and Diva can both hit multiple targets at once, and with your right click and laser, you can do a ton of extra damage. Communication is really important, so don't just grab by yourself. And some miscellaneous tips. Zarya's grab is a projectile, so Genji's deflect can also bounce it back, so you just really need to be very mindful of that. Also, you really want to figure out what support ults the enemy has, or if the Winston has Primal Rage, since when you do grab, you need to consider that the Winston will Primal Rage and the supports will use their defensive ultimates. So if you can actually kill them before you grab, you'll be able to guarantee more kills more quickly, and you'll be in a much better spot for your grab, allowing you to get more kills. Anyway, I hope these tips helped you guys out. I hope that made sense. Let me know if I missed any advanced techniques that you'd like to let other players know in the comments down below, and also comment down below which guide you'd like to see next. I still have yet to do the defensive ultimates and the supportive ultimates, so let me know what you would like to see. Also, don't forget to leave a like, as it really helps us know that you guys are enjoying the content, and don't forget to subscribe, as we have a lot of Overwatch League content and tips and tricks videos so that you can be the best Overwatch player that you can be. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Have a nice day. My name is Nathan, and this was Blizzard Tanks.